We are recording. And we are live, just waiting for the attendees, whoever they may be.
Welcome to the planning board meeting. September 21st. The agenda for tonight is to hear the Market Landing Park expansion site plan review. We're in the middle of that, and to effectively start the special permit for the restroom visitor facility. We opened it and continued it immediately back in August, so tonight will be the first discussion of that application. In the general business, we have a correspondence letter, and then we have approval of minutes and other updates. We begin with roll call. Alden Clark.
Here.
Bob, that's the wheel. Here. Bob Cout.
Here.
Danny Pennington.
Here.
Heather Rogers. Here. Rick Changer. Here. Don Walters.
Here.
Richard Baker.
Here. Here.
Bonnie Sontag here, and we have Andy Fort, planning department, and Linda Guthrie, our note team. So we'll dive right in with the continued discussion of site plan review for Market Landing Park. I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to actually, most of the presentation overview, I think, will come from Maren Braco, who's from Sasaki here this evening. We also have, just for clarification, Dan Dwyer from Sasaki as well for the related building DOD special permit. But we'll cover, obviously, in the overview where we are with the site plan first. So I'm just going to, Maren, if you wanted to use the podium, that might be helpful, just because the microphone is helping to amplify our voices, so folks can speak into them, including myself. It'll make it easier for the owl to pick that up, and that way the folks at home and our other board member who's participating remotely can hear us. I'm just going to pull up our slides. Okay.
Good evening, my name is Maren Braco. I'm a project manager and landscape architect from Sasaki, leading the Market Landing Park expansion.
Sorry, you might have to get a little closer to the mic, or if it can be angled anywhere. Yeah, that's
Are you
great.
guys?
That's better. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And so today we're here again, following up on the September 7th meeting to cover some of the comments we heard during that time. So we'll look first at the west plot and talk about some follow-up comments on the EV parking and the terminus of the shared use path. We'll then move to the east lot to look at bicycle circulation and bike parking, and then focus on the swing trails. Andy, would you like to speak to the goals?
Sure, thank you. As you know, I think I've been trying to let the planning board know, based on the time frame of the project, that our hope is that the board will be able to issue a site plan approval this evening. Of course, based on revisions that we're overviewing tonight, we've tried to address the board's concerns based on the discussions previously, both the informal and the hearing we had previously. The DOD architectural review, obviously, we know that you'll be looking at that under the special permit, which we understand we'll discuss a little bit further this evening. But our hope basically is that the board will be able to approve a site plan that shows where that footprint again is. So I know most members were here previously, but just as a recap, the park project is expected to start construction this spring, and we have a lot of work to do after incorporating the planning board's adjustments to have build-ready plans and specs. So for that reason, we're hopeful that as we've finalized the site plan and put some specificity into the building footprint and screening for the restroom doors on the landscape plan, that you'll be able to approve the site plan, thereby leaving most of the discussion relative to the building as a self-contained discussion, in part because that allows us to proceed with the site plan work that needs to be done, including everything around the building for in the coming weeks and months, so we can get that going for bid over the fall and winter season. So basically, we've resubmitted plan sheets that show these changes. We have the black and white line drawings this evening we can go to, but most of what we're covering is in the slide presentation tonight, where we've blown up some areas, for instance, and walking through, we've made adjustments based on your prior feedback. And again, just to recap, this is just the design schedule. I know some of you have seen this slide before, but we're well through a lengthy process we've gone through primarily with the city council and its ad hoc committee that was established for this. But we've gone through a process to date from early concept and schematic design leading up to where we are now with a fair amount of input from the city council on both the plan and the building component of this project to replace the restrooms and the visitor booth that's there. And our next steps are to take these finalized plans and put them out for bid so we can be ready for spring construction. I would note, by the way, good news, we did today or yesterday afternoon get confirmation of $400,000 from the state parks grant, which is one of the funding sources we were hoping for. So that has come through, and the city council has done its portion of funding for the CPC's recommendation. So all things are on track for construction this spring, and we're anxious to incorporate whatever further changes the board may need so we can move ahead with that piece.
And so this is just a recap of the site plan and the design changes that we presented last time we were here. So we can distinguish all of the bike parking, some of the parking along the east and west blocks, and some of the vehicular situation as well. And so tonight we just included some of these black and white drawings to really get into some of the details. In this slide, you've seen before, but there's some additional information. So we widened the 10 minutes of the shared use path. Maybe you could zoom in a little bit on that, might be hard to see here. So it's a 10-foot shared use path, and we've essentially doubled it at the end and with that flush so that pedestrians and cyclists will be directed towards the parking lot and away from what will be hopefully the future of the shared use path. So that's at 21 feet wide there. And then just one other sort of minor note on the other side of the plan is we coordinated with our electrical engineer to confirm that we'll have the power available to make the whole row of parking EV capable. We'll be adding in conduit into not the wiring and making sure that that's stubbed and labeled appropriately so that it's clear what the use is for that in the future when the city is ready to invest more heavily in parking spots. We've also just, had more conversations with them about the transformers. We've added a note there of the location for the transformers power use. And then in the east lot, a few clarifications here. I think in the last meeting we shared an illustrative drawings. We brought in the black and white so you can really see the details. We had presented additional bike parking both along the service parking area, along the workway, and at the beginning of the shared use path. If you could zoom in to that area where we've added bike parking there, exactly. And so we looked a little bit more closely at where we can put that parking. So there's 3 bike racks on the top and then 5 at the bottom. We've added some additional paved structures to the planting bed so that it can have, and this is a large event, there's 3 service vehicles. You could get easily from the back of one of the trucks and onto the sidewalk. And there shouldn't be any conflict between cyclists and we wouldn't be forcing anyone to walk out into the parking lot. So we've made that subtle change there. And then this is again very similar to the slide we presented on the 7th. I'll just highlight that we've added a notation here and also in the document drawings that were submitted that we've added signage for bike parking locations. So there'll be one on either side of the shared use path as you enter the park, and then one at the visitor center. Again, this is a similar, this slide should look pretty familiar from the 7th. We just clarified some of the language, so labeled, change the label from EV ready to EV capable for those 14 added spots. And then clarify the service parking. So we have event service parking in the east block, and then one restaurant for this parking adjacent to the new dumpster enclosure. We've also included here, just clarified where the 8 permitted spots would be. That exists today, they'll be slightly reconfigured, but maintained in the proposed parking lot.
For those of you who don't know, just as a maybe a reminder for some of you, but those spaces are actually associated with this building here. The redevelopment authority had agreed years ago in relation to that project to designate some spaces. So we're maintaining that commitment. Essentially, we're just reconfiguring where the spaces are slightly in that lot.
Again, just some updates to this slide. We've added in the phase 1 part to just give a fuller context of what phase 1 will look like in that interim condition, the interim parking layout. We've also reconciled some of the discrepancies in the parking count, so those have been adjusted. And again, we just clarified where those 8 existing permitted spots are, and they'll be maintained in the interim. And for this, there's some content that we touched on in the meeting back in July, but didn't get to speak too much in the last meeting. So we just wanted to speak to the design intent for the swing trellis structures and walk you through what we can documented in 75%, some of the alternatives we've been looking at, and some sunshade studies. So this slide is really just speaking to what sort of our design goals are for these trellis structures, and the details and manufacturers and costs fluctuate, but we want to sort of keep with a sort of consistent notion that these would be a metal structure with wood slats. In terms of functionality, they would be providing shade and offer a range of swing types. So whether you want to lounge or have more of a seat style swing. And then, really importantly, that they have the right scale for what will be like the sort of center of this park, the heart of Newburyport waterfront. And part of that has to do with that shade structure, providing that volume, so it's not just a linear element within the plaza, but it's also thinking about the way that the structure has been laid out within the plaza and the rhythm, which we spent quite a bit of time considering as we developed from the schematic design to the 75% set. So the next slide, a couple of slides will speak to that 75% set design. So here you can see the lounge and the seat style swings, which is intermingled, so that if you have kids that want to play on the lounge seats and grandparents that want more of that structured back and arm support, they could still sit next to each other but in swings and socialize. We've spaced them out so that you can sort of circulate around them. Someone could be behind and pushing the swing. It also is a cost saving measure. There's a subtle curve in the shared use path, and when we looked at what it would take to design that curve, it added a lot of customization and expense, and I think it actually creates a really nice rhythm across the plaza that has with those gaps in between. And then this is just some of the details, looking at the wood slabs, and there's been a lot of questions around the shade that they'd be providing. We have another slide that speaks to that, but what we specified is it's a 1.5 inch thick board, that's 5 inches wide at the top with a 4-inch cap in between. So they're pretty densely structured there. It's slightly different from the earlier renderings you did, but we have gotten into the details. And so we have been looking at other alternatives, as you mentioned in the last meeting, and that's largely driven by costs. They are one of the most expensive features within phase 1. And so we've been speaking to different manufacturers, but again, always with those same design intents. So having that generous canopy that really provides that volume on the plaza, those wood slats that are running horizontal, so that you can provide a structural element parallel to those that can hold the swing. So all of these options sort of fit those criteria for us. We haven't seen a huge difference in the cost at this point, and we're still working through that. Some have actually been much higher, but we're working with the city to sort of determine the best case, but I think we're all pretty happy with the range of options that we have here. And then finally, just looking to address some of the questions around shade. I think we are hopeful that the shade structures themselves can provide the appropriate amount of protection from the sun. The canopy structures, more of a fabric, are additional maintenance to consider. We probably need to be taken down in the winter. But we've looked at sort of what the sun, or how the sun moves across the site. And there's a lot of things working in our favor here, actually. So when you're sitting on a swing, you're facing north. And so you're never going to get that direct sun glare. It rises in the east on that side where the harbor master building is, and then moves around the south to the west. We've had pretty significant planting behind on that southern side, so that's actually doing a lot of work for us to filter out the sun for that summer heat. This is all taken the summer heat stuff from June 21st, sort of at the worst case scenario. And that concludes the presentation. We have a lot of the other slides that we can
Thank you very much. We have responded to certainly the majority of the big questions that we were talking about now, and probably in the detail. I'm not hearing myself. Is anybody else hearing me?
When you're close to it, I can hear you.
So let me turn it over to the board members who have their individual questions from last time or this time to comment. I also want to say that we have two members that are not eligible to vote because they missed two meetings, and that's just part of the procedure on voting eligibility. But they are certainly welcome to speak and ask questions and what we're looking at right now. So please feel free to, for everybody to comment at this time. So the first person who indicates they want to speak.
So thank you. I guess I have two questions that maybe possibly need the answers. I'm not sure. So the new plans that we have are the one set of 6 sheets or something. And so as I said in the email, there are 5 changes here, such as lowering the curve, which doesn't show on that plan sheet. Obviously, different plan sheet, I think, that the reading plan would be somewhat different. And so I'm just wondering how you think we should proceed with this, given that we won't see the final plans.
Sure, I understand what you're referring to, because when we first submitted this plan set, I think what Rick is referring to is the fact that we provided an entire 75% plan set. Here, we provided to you the materials and layout sheet to show where the adjustments have been made. But because of all the cost and expense and the difficulty of doing a million different plan updates between meetings, the intent was to present that substance to you here on the layout sheets, the black and white drawings, and in these renderings here, and then moving forward to have the entire bid set match this this final layout here with these details and have the grading be according to that. So we're happy to, if it makes sense to add a special condition, I'm happy to propose language, but a special condition just clarifying that any other drawing sheets from the 75% set that's referenced would be updated accordingly to match these drawing sheets here that you're looking at tonight. But that was our intent, was to finalize that we have what the planning board is looking for there, and then have the grading sheets, everything else that is going out to bid match that. So the detail sheets and things like that, that the board here wouldn't typically be dealing with, we would have anything like that match.
Well, maybe I could just be asked a specific question. If you go up to the sheet that shows the
Sorry, did you want the drawing sheet or the
drawing sheet
sure.
that shows the upper left corner. So yeah. So I guess my question is, it's not really clear. I know we talked about it, but what happens to the curve where those relocated boulders are, which is an area that bikes are supposed to be able to ride up on, so it's presumably flush, right?
Yeah, actually, if I could, and Maren, correct me if I'm wrong here, well, we had actually did a discussion about this, whether or not that is brought down level here for this length or around the entire corner. Because we're trying to respect the travel lane here, you know, maybe amongst other things. Our intent was to have a curb line here, but to lower it along this length here. So that this is a 20-foot, 21-foot wide span. Our intent also from a design perspective was not to have a huge swath of asphalt. So what we're trying to do is curve that out, flare it out so that you could, as was requested at the last meeting, provide more of a direct connection to the drive aisle between the two bays there here, rather than directing people along the walkway. And that was, I think, the board's concern that we would be directing people inappropriately to more of a sidewalk.
So, always the devil's advocate. So, where the pavement striping is, yeah, yes, is that level or is that the beginning of that?
I don't recall. If you want to hold on a second, I may be able to pull up a photograph of that area.
We're meeting existing grade there, and I can tell you, you have already placed relocated boulders at that curve because it's kind of a tricky condition where that whole edge is actually was left condition, so it wasn't a particular curve length. Actually, even farther than where we have those boulders, so it's a matter of, it was already, I think, a 3 to 4 inch curve, so.
Well, I think you're asking Rick specifically about whether this area is level, correct?
So when bicycles are coming east to west, on the north side of that path, what are they hitting the ramp or are they hitting that?
Here, they're meeting a flush condition that then goes over to here. So here, this is flush going to here. This is going to be flush or meeting the grade here. Is your question whether or not the ramp goes down here sloping towards the water? Yeah, I can go back. I don't know whether their grading plans show that level of detail. I can go back and see. I probably have a photograph of that area that we can verify right now. Yeah.
So
I don't believe it starts there. I believe the actual tip down starts a little bit further over here, but I can verify with a photograph in a moment.
So the different, the PA21, PA20 are not asphalt.
Correct, those are brick pavers, so the distinction is whether they're vehicular or pedestrian.
Anyway, we were a little bit less inclined to extend the asphalt across that whole area, just seeing how that would appear. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about how looking at we move over to 31.
Sure.
So that is pavered.
Off to the side that's been added, yes.
Yes, those are.
So I guess, I assume it doesn't show, obviously, on the grading plan, it shows the new grades, the plans that you have, don't say that. So that's what I hate to approve something that.
Understood. Yeah, I will defer to the board. I'm happy to propose language to clarify that, that there'll be a reconciliation between any grading. I do happen to have photographs of these intersections, for instance, that I've marked up showing where the entrances are, just so you can kind of see. But certainly it makes sense there. We have every intent of meeting those grades, making accessibility and meeting those existing grades, and not having any slopes that are inappropriate. So I can tell you that this is essentially reaching a flush condition across this entire area, because this is basically the board's. Sure. 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 Meet existing grades. Yep. Sure.
I guess not. Oh, I think the question also. Here's what the site plan review of the special permit. But since screening is not shown on the site plan, are we assuming that screening will be? Will say that screening is subject to the special permit?
Yes, we're happy to take that as well. I think that maybe makes sense. I think what you're referring to is on the black and white lawn drawings right here. Is it-
Doesn't mean you decide it, so I was just, you know, that's such a condition. I want to make sure that, I think that's the seating, they were showing the seating.
Correct. We didn't capture as much detail on this as we presented to you last time, but we do have the slides to show the vegetation there. I certainly think, and I'll defer if Mary wants to add anything to this, but I think we're fine with whether it's conditions on the site plan or in the DOD special permit that clarify. And the office tried to put in some language that spoke to the fact that regardless of what happens in this area, that the plantings have to go with the building there. With the intent being, as you go into that discussion about the building, that the row of doors be screened. And that's integral to the building project, so to speak.
But I guess my preference would be not to try to light it during the site plan review, but to do a condition of special permit.
Sure. We have no objection to that. That makes sense, I think, to capture it there. We're certainly fine, in my opinion. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Just a couple of quick questions about the swing. So one comment and one question. The base scheme that you have, I think, has advantages in that there are no posts in respective view of the river. Some of the other alternatives you showed did have posts. So I would encourage you to, stay with something that doesn't obstruct you. I did have one question. You mentioned grandparents and kids in this zone, which is very central to the overall park. This is really the only seating option in this zone that I've noticed on the plans, and I just wondered if you could speak to that, whether or not there should be some conventional park bench elements as well, to just supplement.
Sure, we could certainly look at that. We do have conventional seating on the western gate of the plaza and throughout the park along the ways. But I think there's certainly room within the area of the plaza.
Definitely good. Yeah.
Is there any other questions? Sorry, go for it.
Just to follow up on that, on the question that was just raised about the seating area, is there any designated like handicap area that's adjacent to the swings so that we can offer that in close proximity?
Yes, we do have companion seating at the social seating, sort of these granite steps, so there was space, looks like still sharing. So just below that SM00, we've included a space so that if you're sitting on a seat that you can pull up your wheelchair. And with any of the cafe tables or picnic tables that we've selected, we've included an ADA option within that. I think, are you asking specifically about if someone could pull up next to one of the swings?
Yes, I was sorry. My question was more related to someone who had someone on the swings and they could be at least adjacent or nearby supervision, what have you, whatever it's called.
Yeah, the spacing provides that, right?
Yeah, I think that's also one of the advantages of having this gas station structure. You can allow for that type of movement. Is there someone else who wants to speak? Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted a clarification on the bicycle racks in the east parking lot. I like the additional bike rack. I think that's good. So we have the section there where there's bike racks, but there's also another section nearer the harbor master building. And I guess I just wanted to confirm, are both of those in phase two, or is a section by the harbor master going to be part of phase one?
From this part right here, so actually this one is existing. This one we're adding on the other opposite side, and that is part of phase one.
The others are phase two?
We intend Fur Wharf Way to be constructed as part of phase one. We do have to talk a little bit as we go forward. As we've talked a little about before, we have limited funding. We don't have enough to do phase two, generally speaking, would be the parking areas. We're going to transition that as best we can, I think, because we're going to be maintaining the curb line in there essentially, irrespective of the fact that it will continue to be a gravel parking lot, for some time. Because we're defining that edge, we'll be able to have all those improvements there within phase one. Maren, am I missing anything, or do you want to speak to that? I know we have to talk a little bit tomorrow about where we are in terms of costs, so. Yeah.
Our assumption was that Fair Work Way constructed, but that edge that has a craft and treatment thing, we constructed as part of phase two. Part of that.
And keep in mind, we're in a second now of three cost estimates we're doing, and as we go approaching bid, trying to get an idea of how much we can cover ground we can cover here. As was clarified, just as context, was clarified to the Preservation Committee earlier this year, and then to the City Council when a discussion was had about how much to fund of the project. We did, make it clear that there was a potential for some landscaping or things along the edge that might be beneficial to the park. That couldn't necessarily be done in phase one, depending on where we end up in terms of the costs and that phase line. Fair Wharf Way, we're obviously completing that pedestrian way, and there was a request from the council generally to complete the bones of the park and then focus if there need to be further fundraising on the site elements, because it's obviously becomes a little easier to focus fundraising on something like that that's tangible that folks can see, as opposed to low grade work or surface work. To that question, I guess we have to have further discussions, and of course, as we go out to bid, we're going to cover as much ground as we can. If we have a good bid, we're going to add if it's an add-on to the bid process or a change order, we're going to extend that as best we can. We hadn't had this detailed discussion about, where exactly this line is going to fall. Again, my hope was that we'd be able to pull up to the curb line there, but we'll have to have a discussion about that, mainly because we're going to have to stabilize that edge anyway for the walkway. I guess we'd have to have a further discussion about that piece. But clearly we'll be doing the walkway. I'd like to have us aim for, even if it's by a add-on during the bid, completing to the curb line here, mainly because we're gonna have to stabilize that generally anyway.
Staying on this image, so we kind of wait for about benches. There are 5 benches here that are facing the parking lot, and I guess I'm just wondering what the function of those 5 benches are, because they're not really part of the park. Are the food trucks here? Why are they looking out into the parking lot? That's the first one. And the second part also related to this is, we talked last time about these bike racks, these additional bike racks being way out of the direction that most bicyclists would come. And we asked the question last time about whether it be possible to come down very work away from the shared use path to those bike racks and use those bike racks. And the question is that possible, and doing the signage directly?
Sure. Great question. I guess one that I defer to Maren on the design question and then part on the Fair Wharf Way question, because we did have some discussion about whether or not, for instance, Fair Wharf Way would make sense or could be done to widen Fair Wharf Way. I do think from the benches perspective, I certainly have no objection to adding or adjusting where benches are, but I think the at least one thought there is that people will be congregating or meeting in that location because it's adjacent to the parking lot, and so having some seating there might be beneficial. Maren, I don't know if you want to speak to the question of the width itself. We certainly have signage, as Maren mentioned earlier, at the entrances, at each entrance, essentially the key entrances to the park, directing folks to where additional bike parking is. So for instance, if they got to this one or the 2 that are there, if they got there and there wasn't sufficient bicycle parking because they were all used up, they would see a quick sign saying, head up the path this way and turn left, and you'll reach additional bicycle parking. Maren, do you want to speak to the way, the width of the way? And
Sure. So two comments. We had designed, and I think we covered this line, using this long area behind where those benches are to accommodate food trucks and other parking. So those are, could be a good places to have lunch. And it can be said, there's sort of belongings to the park. We did look at the width, and it's actually a 12-foot wide path, which is wider than the shared use path. The shared use path is 10 with a 12-foot buffer, I'm sorry, 2-foot buffer to make it 12 feet wide in order to handle fire truck accidents. So, you know, we considered widening it, but realized that it is actually already the widest path in the park. So I think it needs to be accommodate that extra like.
I guess in terms of those mentions, since the idea is to have the best possible duplex in that one area, would it make sense to flip them and have a face in the park, like a much of a landscaping area? You know, it might be more attractive to look at the park than the little parks.
Yes, I think we could certainly do that for the two that are farther into the park. For the three, maybe it's in the ducks. So I would recommend.
And keep in mind in here, I know we went over this a little bit more in the last meeting maybe, but this area of the lawn here, we're designing so it can support some of those vehicles for both the setup of larger events, but also whether or not there needs to be any placement of food trucks and things like that here. So there's some a need for some sort of back and forth of vehicles potentially there, not all the time, obviously, but during key events going this way.
About the EV charging, ones that are going to be activated. From what I saw on the plans, it looked like they were going to connect it to a transformer that is related to the living plant. Is that transformer going in separately in phase one, so that we have the two EV charging stations up and running?
Yeah, so there's potentially two transformers depending on which level of EV charging that you select. But the first one to support just the two EV and could support level 2 for the full day is located in that landscaping that would be part of phase 2. That would go in, that transformer would go in at the same time as the EV parking and the full parking lot in phase 2.
So that looks like it's straight phase 2. Because it's part of the parking lot.
Right.
So it's a little better than phase 3. Any other questions? Fine.
Actually, a somewhat similar question. So the transformer will not be installed until phase 2.
Correct.
Okay, I just mentioned that because the black and white sketch specifically notes the 2 EV stations for phase 2, and because the transformer wasn't labeled for those 2 EV stations and or possibly the future ones, perhaps you might just want to put a note on this, even though I'm assuming it's not going to be in the bid documents for phase 1.
Sure, and we do have Jamie Millette on the listening in here, and she may be better to speak to exactly what utilities we're putting in within phase 1. Obviously, we won't have the EV parking, and we won't need that transformer, but I believe from all the groundwork will be happening in phase 2. Jamie, can you clarify?
Could you repeat the question? It is a little difficult to hear over video.
Jamie, can you hear me speaking okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, Maren. It's the majority of the planning board, it's a little muffled.
Okay. Yeah, they were just asking for clarification on when the transformer would be installed, and my assumption of that would go in during phase 2, but maybe you could just speak to what utilities are being installed during phase 1.
The transformer that is just north of the shared use path, or
The transformer closer to the visitor center. And
that I would have to follow up with RFS, but I do believe that transformer would be installed during phase 2 of the park construction. But I can clarify that.
That's fine, thank you. And also, what is the elevation of the base of the transformer?
All of the electrical is being designed to be above floor level. So this one I can't speak to specifically. We haven't looked into this one as much, but I know there's one adjacent to the water where we looked at that elevation very closely.
Sorry. Hi. We haven't, we have to take a look at the elevations, but we were basically planning on doing the same thing with that equipment as we're doing with the building. So we had brought the building up to 15.33. And obviously, we're going to be looking at this piece of equipment. It's going to be basically on a concrete pedestal, probably, in its location because of it's closer to the water, but still needs to be elevated to stay above that future sea level rise. So that's what effectively we're doing. We happen to be looking at, there's a lift station the city's looking at on Water Street, going out to the island. We're looking to do the same thing to basically move that inland for similar reasons.
I can tell you the planting bed where we located the transformer right now actually has quite a bit of everything. There's some steps right next to it that goes from 12 to 15, and the plaza is set at elevation 15 to get the building at 15.33, which would be the 27.1% storm.
So my only other comment would be is whenever you do put the transformer in whatever phase, it's not obvious to me taking a look at this, that one would take into account some form of shrubbery or fencing, whatever, and as compared to seeing some type of a transformer, which I assume is a yet to be determined size. And you've done a whole lot of great work and all those things. And the worst thing people want to do is walk past and see this ugly transformer like the wastewater treatment facility. Thank you.
That's why we raised it up, and because we have some flexibility at this point.
And I just wanted to comment on the phasing plan. I know phasing plan is just the schedule. The phasing plan shows the area of the transformer by phase 3. And so it shows the phase 2 and that the schedule right. So we just want to make sure that that gets adjusted because we need that one for the state.
Correct, so
Yeah, if I could, if I'm not mistaken, I think what we're seeing here is in phase 1, we're doing the walkway, but we're not doing the transformer, which would be part of phase 2, which is the parking area. The prior presentation, or is it in part of the appendix? It might be part of the appendix here. Yeah. One phase 2. Yeah. Okay, so right down here, you're talking about.
right, so we need to add that.
Expand that phase out of the.
Got it.
But the problem is then you're going to be beginning to raise the platform for the business. So
Before it's there.
Yeah, that's as well.
Yep. Yeah, to put it in. Yeah. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get some state funding, economic development and so forth, tourism and whatnot for the visitor, facility as well. So.
All right, last call. Any other comments or questions? Richard?
Just a minor one. If you could bring up the black and white close-up of the area where the trucks would be temporarily parking for events and things of that sort. I just wanted to make one small observation. It's not a question. So the newly installed, or what will be the newly installed bike rack, those 3 racks right at that corner where the trucks are going to come in.
Yeah,
Can you put your
right here.
cursor? No, up. Those are the 4. Go up.
Oh, sorry, you're right
there,
here.
Right here. Yeah. You may want to consider putting a bollard there because as those trucks back up, they're going to take out a bike. And just practical
Gotcha.
observation. It's just.
We will do that.
Yeah, it's too tempting.
Okay, good point.
Board members, is that it? Okay, so we need to review the decision itself. And I know in conversations with Rick, we found some things that were not included from our previous discussion when I read through this and took very sketchy notes, but we reconstructed those and submitted the changes to Andy. And I'm just wondering, Andy, how you want us to correctly. Did you see what Rick had submitted to you and?
And my apologies, did you send it late today or was it? Okay, well, my apologies for, I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm happy to pull that up right now. Do you want to cover the extent to which any of the special conditions or whatnot in the draft decision from the office are incorporated and then go to that, or how do you want to? Okay, okay, sure, yep.
A lot of things that we didn't discuss the last time. And if there's any further outstanding from tonight's discussion, we can add them in. And that will be the final draft which we will vote tonight.
And my apologies that I hadn't seen that. Okay. Here we go.
So on the community, director, this is really just kind of cleaning things up. I think adding creation of additional parking space, parking lot reorganization, redesign landscaping, the harmony with character of the existing park, just to be a little more specific. Those are just kind of language tweaking. Under traffic, parking, and public access, I thought the thing about activity and use limitation areas is really not related to traffic and parking, but was related to environmental protection. So we move down to that section. There was the area there about the charging stations. On the next page of the site plan, architectural design. That was very
Sorry, did you want to?
well, just that.
Yeah.
Just clarifying words.
Yep.
So there's some very small minor change. Oh, Bonnie had a question, I think. Under the pedestrian for access to traffic index, are these numbers been updated?
I don't think. I'm looking at your chart, it shows in the slide, it was 200, not 250 spots at all, so there it was 245 or something.
Yeah, I think we can update that reference because I think we should also reference in there the bicycle parking rack numbers as well.
So you have
So-
that question right there.
Correct. Yeah, we Caitlin and I will take a look tomorrow. We'll make sure that that's updated and referenced there and includes the bicycle parking as well.
And farther down, we all use the one that existing structure.
So under lighting, it's just the less specific, not referencing the specific building regulations. Next page of stormwater runoff, water quality and conversion flow, is adding the updated date for the stormwater management plan.
Which would be consistent with the final plan references that you'd see above, right?
So now, here's an area where for the modifications to the approved plan. I highlighted a sentence in minor changes to include writing, but you'll be further reviewed by the planning board. I have another set conditions, proposed special condition later, it's just cross referencing that, in case you were busy enough. I had a question on hours of construction, whether we want to be working on the park on Saturday. I said, that's the question.
Well, I can tell you it for this point in time, allowing any flexibility we can, given the unusual circumstances of, we're trying to minimize impact on the peak summer season, obviously. Unfortunately, unlike the bulkhead project, we have to do this during the peak summer season, whereas the bulkhead one can be done over the winter. So we'd like to allow that space or latitude. We obviously will be coordinating quite a bit between the mayor's office, the ward councilor and everyone else, and the parking clerk and all others. Waterfront Trust, and making sure that we're not impacting folks, but we would like to allow construction work on Saturday just from a permitting perspective to the extent that might be necessary, even if it's one day here or there.
I propose to take the standard condition to the sidewalk.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fair. The ordinance has some, we've generically to date treated it in some instances with some boilerplate language. But I think you're right in this instance, it doesn't need to be referenced in this decision. So, yeah, sure.
So under special conditions. So, taking the notice of the new special condition number 1. And I guess I just, rather than say 12 to 16, 12 to 16, it seems like it's fewer 12 to 16, so I thought it would be several.
Yeah. It all makes sense.
So number 5, this is something to consider. This the project is likely to change over time. So I'm proposing for discussion that each project phase is proposed to be initiated for 1 year after the date of site plan. As an option that I said, specific date that is working for. So be subject to further review by the planning board in order to ensure consistency with the approved site plan and or to submit for approval of the proposed changes other than field changes, grading adjustments, or other similar non-substantive changes. Which changes should be reviewed and approved by the board as minor modifications. And the reason for this is that I think there are going to be potentially lots of changes that will happen. You'll probably refine the plan that you get to phase 2. And so it would be appropriate rather than lots of the phase 2 and see if it's very different from what we do. Have to come back to it's just for either confirmation or.
Sure. Sure. Could I ask, just, and again, thinking about it from the project management perspective, given the fact that in hypothetical, and I don't necessarily disagree, I think, certainly a few years out, there might be some reconsideration of certain factors and a desire to come back and make some adjustments, again, not knowing. But in the scenario in which there aren't any changes to the plan, could we add or adjust the phrasing to accommodate the scenario in which there aren't any changes to the plan, and 2 years out, we're doing, phase 2, the parking, and we're doing the visitor building, and there aren't any changes, we wouldn't necessarily have to come back procedurally for no changes? If that, okay. But I appreciate the concern, yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate that concern, seeing how long it could take to do some of the projects. I appreciate that, yeah.
And then while we were here tonight, there were 3 things that I would like to include or consider. One was to specifically say about the shared use bathroom rules that we discussed.
Yes.
The second one is to make sure that transformer supporting phase 2 put in at the same time as the previous phase 2. Somehow going to phase 2.
Understood.
And the third one is, I would like to be able to see. So I don't know whether you're going to, what your plan is, when you're going to spend going to care. The updated rate plan, actually, the layout material plan.
Sure.
What is the timing?
Well, once we close the site plan review, we're sort of fast going into that level of detail. Mary, can you speak to the Sasaki's timeframe for churning out the revised plans?
Sure, so we were holding to the end, the one effort until after we make a pre-permitting. Once we get through that, we're anticipating to be about 2 months, so October, November.
I wanted to be clear that this is, we're treating the city special. It's not a private development. We have to kind of ask for the normal for this, we have a consent. That being said, I understand your budgetary planning. And of course, we don't think it's 75% of 100%. So I would have liked to have
Experience in putting a special condition in, before a building permit can be pulled or some such absolute deadline of construction starting, that it be reviewed, usually by the planning office, but in this case, it would be reviewed by the vice chair of the planning board.
Well, yeah, again, I'll defer to you on how you want to handle it. I think you could have the vice, the chair and the vice chair take a look at it. You could also have the zoning administrator, granted that's in the office, but the zoning administrator verify. I don't think she'd have any problem holding us, firm to it, but we could, to your point, we've had conditions like this before. So, for instance, the applicant shall submit a fully revised 100%, bid set for the record that verifies that grading sheets and other drawings have been rectified to match the final layout sheets that you've approved here this evening. And we could add language to that effect,
They would submit,
prior to construction, period.
They would submit a confirmation, but we wouldn't actually see it.
Well, no, we could provide it to the board. I just, in terms of process, I don't know whether you didn't necessarily have to do something with that. I think what we need really just from a practical perspective, and this is me with my permitting hat on, is you can have the zoning administrator basically enforce that there's no construction of the project, period, until we have that in, which we wouldn't be able to do, frankly. We're going to be going out to bid this winter, so we have to have all that, in hand. But you could make a condition that prior to the construction, you could make it subject to, email confirmation from the chair or the vice chair or something like that, if you like. But I think the zoning administrator would be holding us to that same condition. So.
We can have it come back to the whole board, but we all know that if we don't feel like looking for the details, it's going to as an I would, so that that's a call us out and position. But I like that connection with the zoning administrator and the planning board.
To get a copy.
Yeah, get a copy.
Sure.
And confirm, and the planning board will confirm with the zoning administrator that
Sure,
is in conformance with our decision.
understood.
Is there anything outstanding that you think before I call for a motion?
You hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just have one comment. I actually went back and looked at the environments and developers. I feel like there's a pretty good history of what you're proposing, and even the presentation tonight narrows down a fair amount. I'm very flexibility and specificity. I'm not a fan of special condition number 1. I would strike it entirely and make it subject to the same, change conditions as the rest of the application. Because the way special condition number 1 is written, I'm not.
Could I speak to you? Sorry, could I use this? Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to reiterate part of the context, that part of the reason why it's difficult for us to specify a particular vendor or model and so forth, is because we have, one amongst other reasons is, as we talk about the cost of it, is we have to go out to bid. And as a public agency, we have to have alternates available to contractors. So we have to provide some latitude in here when we go out to bid for essentially the same character. So what I was trying to do as we look to craft language for the decision was something that would capture what the board was looking for here, without necessarily impeding upon the requirement that we have under the procurement laws at the state level, that when we go out to bid, we have 3 or more, options available to the contractor to meet that, or if they want to submit something to us. So that's what we were attempting to do there. And I'm not sure if you mean if it goes beyond that, then it would come back to the board, or it needs to change. Obviously, that would have to come back to the board. But if you're talking about within that scope there, are you suggesting that the particular model or whatnot come back to the board, or?
No, I'm saying the problem with the alternative is all better than the kind of wide open possibilities.
Understood.
And so I would rather rely on what you provided. Number 1. So I would just strike number 1.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I don't know. I mean, I had felt that was capturing what the, balance between what the board had said the last meeting. So I don't know if you have different thoughts on that.
I don't think the materials that were applied for the vision are in.
That the drawings seem like my drawings that have been last week are having. There's been part of the application materials.
So,
I will maybe I'll question to the board instead of.
so the question then, I think the materials that were in the August plans are good enough to work with.
Exactly. It's kind of similar to some of the other things that are not quite correct with the drawings as well.
I agree.
So strike number 1 as a.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to understand, make sure we have it correctly. And again, this is partly from the permitting perspective, partly from the project management perspective, but whether, if because here tonight we presented three options, but there could be, say, a fourth vendor option that we reach, between now and bid, and we're going out there. There could be another one that is comparable to that, those three things that you saw tonight. Isn't the wood timber one, that we had talked about, at the last meeting as a potential cost saving effort. But is consistent with the, the metal frame, the, wood, joists and so forth, providing shade. I would want to make sure that we're not precluding that possibility here if there's a thought that we're referencing only the three options in the renderings that were provided or the vendor models that were presented tonight, because there might be another iteration of that or another vendor option of that that's consistent, that to me would seem almost silly to come back to the board procedurally to have that approved, but would still be consistent. And that was the intent here, was just to capture the fact that it has to have those substantive pieces. I recognize maybe you're concerned about some latitude here, but this was intended to capture what seemed to be important to the board about the nature of those park amenities or those park features.
So maybe they were around, if I understand what you're saying, maybe you just said that the trellis, the swing trellis district shall have the following key characteristics. Just like that, not like the whole thing about doing all that.
Understood. Yeah, we could certainly remove that first section, right? And just keep the so we basically just we just take out this part right here, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and if you, that,
Yes, so put that on the end. That's what I wanted to check, because there is included in number one is
Yep.
any decision, proposed decision, significant, different
From this approval. Yeah.
from what we have, what has been presented to the board.
Yep.
In this approval, to come back for review.
Understood. Oh, sorry.
Just a quick procedural question. The comments that were made tonight, the detailed comments, how do those get addressed?
That's why the plan, that's why we want to see the plan.
There's nothing that happens in the language here that addresses that.
Unless there's something that we missed that,
So we talked
we
about,
want to call out and subsequent.
there was a volume mentioned, there
Yeah, that.
discussion of benches mentioned. So that's just updating.
Right, everybody comfortable with this? I'll take a motion to, no, no. Yes.
Oh, yeah, we,
We're gonna review the decision at that.
as typical, we expected the chair or vice chair or both will be looking at the draft decision before it's filed to make sure it's consistent with all of your adjustments tonight. So,
Oh, I see. Before I come. Yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
normal. I usually refer that.
Yeah.
In the office as well.
we typically understand that to be as amended this evening. So the draft decision as amended this evening.
Yeah, okay. Ready? So I need a motion to approve the site plan review, application. 24 Merrimack Street, Market Landing Park expansion and restroom visitor facility as amended. With incorporation of the findings and special conditions reviewed tonight, as provided by the Office of Planning and Development into the board's decision. I have a bunch of whatever I can. Thank you. Rick, move second.
Second.
I will now
Thank
take
you,
roll
Bob.
call. Alden,
yes.
yes. Beth,
I abstain.
abstain. Bob,
Yes.
yes. Jamie, Jamie,
Yes.
yes. Heather,
Yes.
yes. Rick,
Yes.
yes. Don,
Ineligible to vote?
abstain. Richard,
Yes,
yes. Bonnie, yes. Motion is approved. Site plan review
Thank you. And we will, as discussed, we'll return back to you with the plans. You'll see everything incorporated. And we'll actually, a lot of this will probably be available online because the whole bid process, a lot of this is done electronically these days. With that, if it's all right with you, I guess, did you need to formally open the special permit hearing for the DOD or?
public hearing for the site plan review was already open.
Okay.
Except for, was opened back on August 17th. So this is continued from there, and as I mentioned earlier, there was no discussion.
Right.
So we'll pick up where we left off, which is right at the beginning.
So with that, I'll pull up some slides, and it looks like Dan will be speaking to these. Here, one of our architects from Sasaki, working on this portion of the project.
Evening. My name is Dan Dwyer, an architect. Project.
I think you need to speak a whole lot closer. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's not higher.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just as a reminder to folks, we're working on getting better equipment, but for now, if you can speak very close to the microphone, it just helps to amplify for anybody who's at home.
Okay. Is better?
That's great. Thank you.
So I think you've seen the building and, so I'll go through a little bit, sort of our thinking process that went into it. And some of the previous feedback that we received from the ad hoc committee first was, the building geometry would be perpendicular to Merrimack Street. And wood cladding was preferred over exterior finish. The visitor center is to face Merrimack Street with a maximum transparency to the visitor center interior. The restrooms are to be individual gender neutral spaces that open directly out to the outside, which helps minimize the building footprint and makes for a very efficient footprint. And there's a flat roof on the building that holds south facing solar panels and a parapet that conceals the view of the solar panels. So the nature of the building being sort of running north-south, we get this plan that a little more. It limited we looked into roofs in different configurations, but when we did the building north-south, the solar panels want to tilt south facing the part of the net zero initiative of the building. It worked best on a flat roof rather than having pitch that would be going facing east and west. And then from the historical committee, the building does not need to mimic the historical building nearby. The building should not contrast with the surrounding historic character. Contemporary design should be explored or respected with the use of traditional materials, increase the level of trim and detail as character, use the harbor master building as reference as well as other buildings. Some other comments that came up along the way, there's an 8-foot long canopy that overhangs, protects the south facing glass from solar heat gain and protects visitors from the rain. Create a little space in front of the visitor center. Restroom doors are set back from the visitor center. Volume, so the visitor center takes prominence on the south side, facing Merrimack Street. The restroom doors are sort of set back, 3-foot overhang. And then another comment was to screen the restroom doors so that it's either landscape or architectural. Proposing a comment. So the proposed site plan, which is included as part of phase 3, down that south. This is the site plan that's in development right now for that space. Again, the building is sort of perpendicular to Merrimack Street, south. There's a seating area on the west side of the building. Here's the plan layout. Remember, you've seen this or not, but there's the visitor center on the south end. One little change we're proposing is actually centering the door, and I'll put it out in the rendering a little bit later. There's a mechanical room, janitor space in the middle, and then 8 individual restrooms. As per code, 50% of them, so 4 would need to be handicapped accessible, those are. The idea is that two to the south would be open, the two closest to the south would be open year round. The six further out to the north would be only seasonally open from May to November.
And then this goes to the question of, operation of the facility. There was questions, and we want to provide flexibility for the future to zone the building essentially the restrooms, and that way we could keep it open more of the year, but not necessarily have to keep the entire facility running.
Another thing that came up along our process was the notion of resiliency of the building. And so we set the building at elevation 15 to 4 inches above sea level, and which is 40 inches above the FEMA elevation 12, which is the base flood elevation level. I may have acronym wrong, but it's intended to be 40 inches above that 12-foot line, which is
The 1% storm event.
We've also traditionally this may have been made as a slab on grade, but we've made it so that it's wood frame floor with crawl space underneath. The building needs to be lifted up in the future. We're setting it up for that.
And we had taken some input from the city engineer on that particular adjustment to work on the footing part of it, and also enough space so that it'd be easy enough to reach underneath essentially and raise that. Again, this is looking further out in the future, but that's why we're here, is to plan for the future.
More level of the building.
Yeah.
Higher water level. Perspective. We know that the harbor master building is a building preferred by some members of the committee, and so we looked at that as precedent. Shingle clad with weight trim. We also looked around Newburyport, primarily sort of the influence of federal style, which is a very unpretentious building style. It doesn't lack a lot, or it doesn't have a lot of architectural detail. It's fairly tight construction. There's a rhythm of windows and openings. There's center entrances were predominantly used, and then also the emphasis on the roof line. So you can see a few of those examples where there's actually a pitch roof, but it's very shallow and it's set back. So from the ground, the roof line doesn't fall out. There's also a few storefronts that we've seen in town that has sort of large panes of glass, mullions for months. So those are some of the also contemporary buildings, again, very sort of tight construction, simple details, mixture, some examples have a mixture of shingles and clapboards. The window details are fairly minimal. Lines and don't have too much trim on them, but there's the emphasis, the overhang, gray, clapboard siding, simple gestures, and transparency into your space. Some of the materials on the building, either cedar shingles, or cedar clapboard siding, or a combination of both. We've looked at and priced teak windows. The original scheme that's in the drawing set just has teak windows without paint finish on it. So when we started redesigning a little bit, we started looking into white trim. The teak is great near the seashore, it's, boats are built out of that. It's a good species to use in the ocean. And then this great granite base around the base of the building. At the wood. Then going through the elevations, two schemes. This first scheme has all clapboard siding. We're using horizontal clapboard siding on the visitor center volume. This view, the top view, also has scheme that's in the drawing set at the moment, which has the door off to one side, which sort of, when we originally had the building on the west side of the site, that the door worked well in that corner. When we moved the building back to where it is now, we intend to have a building that the building entrance is centered on the side.
And I'm sorry, that's because the plaza was originally located on that other side, on that right side here. And now when they're located on the other side there, it seemed to make a little more sense to have it center where you're coming in from the park or coming in from the plaza generally.
We showed some signage on these elevations, but admittedly, it's not something that's been fully studied yet. As far as the font size, the wording of visitor center. So that's something that's still to be studied. But I know it's important. In this other option, we look at using the shingles on this visitor center volume and the horizontal clapboard on the restroom volume, just to differentiate the two. We also intend to use either wood doors or wood cladding on the ornamental doors so that it's it blends in with the sun. This just a close-up view tried to show a little bit more of how we use this white trim. There's a white fascia board along that canopy all the way around the building. Then there's another band at the top of the window across the restroom door setback. And then there's another band just above the granite, facing the windows to the rear edge. This is the view from Airmass Street. And there's another view in the other corner of the plaza. And then we did some studies on the restroom door screening. So we looked at one option is the trellis with its heat wall, fairly sort of an architectural element. Just a wood trellis, but you can have primary vines on it for the trellis itself. Then there was a second version that had a little bit more planting in front. And then the third version, which is on the next page, this is our third option, which is a combination of both. Planting, small planting, sort of a raised planter, and then something taller, bench seating on one end.
Okay, I'm going to do something a little different, planning board for procedures. I'm going to take public comment first, because I want to hear from the chair of the Historical Commission, Glenn Richards, who is available, I know still, remote, and anybody else who would like to speak. And then we'll bring it back in for questions and comments with open public comment. The usual rules apply, name, address, and I'm not going to limit you to 2 minutes tonight because we don't have that many people who want to speak. And we really want as much input as we can get to facilitate our discussion as well. So if Glenn is ready, the questions are muted. Any can
Sure, Glenn, did you want to address the board?
Yes, briefly. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Glenn Richards, 6 Kent Street. And Thanks, Bonnie. And as I think that the board knows, the historical, I'm speaking not on behalf of the Historical Commission, which has not formally reviewed the new plans. I just had a couple of quick comments I wanted to make. I think that, that the architects have done well. Just two things. I would strongly encourage the cedar shingle option. I think that if you think about, especially in the New England seacoast, especially for smaller and auxiliary structures, smaller buildings, the cedar shingles with white trim is very, very appropriate and iconic, and I think that would go well in this setting. So that's one point, and the other one is, excuse me, the renderings had a couple different types of lettering. In one case they were all lowercase, in other cases they were all uppercase. I would, from a design and whatever it is. From a design and legibility standpoint, I would strongly advise not using all uppercase. The initial cap with lowercase is easier to read and just psychologically less, formal looking and more welcoming, in my opinion, anyway. But definitely, research has shown it's easier to read, and I think it would just be more appropriate. Those are the only two comments I have. Thanks very much.
Glenn, please don't leave. I would like you to speak to the report that we received dated July 14th, if you care to, or I can use segments of it and speak directly to the design and how things are going to fit with the Newburyport neighborhood and agencies.
Okay, it's again, anyone who's not right, if for some reason Andy comes through loud and clear, maybe he's right near the microphone or something. Everyone else is sounds like you would like me to address certain questions from the historical report from a month or so back. Is that correct?
I think the question was if you wanted to recap the substance of that. I realized, of course, these comments were before the commission, but if you could just summarize briefly what the commission was originally.
Yeah, well, I think it there isn't much to say about it. I think the board, I'm sorry, I'm chuckling here, but the board wasn't terribly impressed overall with the design, but we also understood that there were a lot of constraints, both financial constraints and design constraints imposed by various interested parties. So, I think it's understood that, you're not necessarily going to get, an IM pay, world standard design structure or whatever. But other than that, the important thing was, it was certainly the board felt that it was an improvement over the temporary situation we have now. And B, due to its size and some of the landscaping features and some of the things that, especially in these later versions that you've done, I think that it's the key thing we have to decide upon. Is it going to have a negative impact or an adverse impact on the historical nature of that particular spot? And of course, that particular spot has been, is cleared of its historical structures that were there years and years ago, but it's been vacant for quite a while. So it's going to kind of stand by itself. So that's almost a bit moot because, it's going to be on its own in this park setting now. So that's a little bit different. So I think we did feel that it was not going to have an adverse impact on historical values. I hope that at least goes a little bit towards answering your question.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else remote who wants to speak at this time? Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak from the public? Please come up and talk places with the applicant moment. Give your name, your address, and what you intend to say. Please speak as closely to the microphone as you can. Thank you.
I'm Wilbur Shank. I live on Beck Street in Newburyport. I'm currently on the Welfare Trust chair, and I just wanted to say that our board has discussed this particular design in quite a bit of detail, and we totally support the current design. And we're only sorry that this is in phase 3 because there's a huge need for nicer restrooms, public restrooms in the park. And so I just want to say we totally support.
One other speaker? Good evening. My name is Rita Howard. I live at 53 Warren Street. I've been in the city now for 12 years. I must say I didn't expect to be speaking tonight, and I didn't even know what I was doing for tonight, but I saw it on the agenda. I had an interest in it. I found it very interesting to listen to tonight. Unfortunately, I want to voice my opinion that I'm very disappointed in this design. I didn't expect to see something that looks like a Stewart's driveway. I find it looks like a fast food thing. And I'm not really aware of the current visitor center. Look at this setback. I don't really know that it's there. I do believe in the need to upgrade if we have something more welcoming to visitors. And I think this is a really good effort to do things, but I really have to say I'm really disappointed in the design, and I don't know whether it's been approved yet or not, but I would really like to see something that puts something more into our character, and as I said, doesn't remind me of fast food place that has gone out of business. It's pressured into a visitor center. I'm sorry to say that, but that, and I'm not good at, visualizing. So I'm not a designer myself, but from what I saw, following to the best of my ability, I wouldn't do it in that design. Sorry to say that. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing anybody else's hand raised, I will close the public comment portion of the hearing and go back to the last slide, which says, do you have any questions? I'll ask the applicant to come back up to the stand. You're on again. And board members would like to speak first.
Thanks, Mike. So a few questions. A few questions. Although it's not included, and although it's a fairly quiet part of the building, I would at least appreciate seeing a real elevation for the building, because there are two materials there, I believe, the way we look at the overall design. And it faces the park. I think it's worth drawing that just to illustrate what that elevation would look like. In terms of the plans, there are various drawings here, and for the visitor center, on the west side of the plan, there are times when there are 3 windows shown, and there are times when there are 2 windows shown. Yeah, and it's not clearly what the intent is.
The intent is 3 windows, and it's in the original drawings that we were trying 2 on one side and 3 on the other. Again, when the building was located on the west side of the state, we're coming inside of that, the eastern corner of the building is. But we do intend to have 3 windows on each side of the cement building, the center.
You made a comment about signage, and I would kind of reiterate that I'm looking at signage that has 2 different sizes. Visitor center is one size, Newburyport, Massachusetts is a different size. I think you should look at trying to make that more consistent. Newburyport, Massachusetts is centered in the opening, visitor center is justified to one side. So I think we've got some fine tuning to do relative to those signs. We'd also like to know what the material is, and eventually what the color is related to that. Question also about whether there's any exterior lighting anticipated and how that would be handled if you are anticipating that.
There's park lighting, the building itself doesn't have, well, I'm sorry, exterior lighting, there's small can lights underneath the soffit of that overhang, as well as one in each door along the side. Those are just downlights that we follow to put up the panels for safety and and then there's park lighting for the plaza.
Is there any lighting near the front of the room doors?
there's a light above the door, a recess with soffit.
Thank you. You mentioned in the scheme with shingles that the inset portions will be horizontal flattened. And I would suggest you just think about that a little bit relative to the details of the board. And maybe that's a flush horizontal detail, maybe the flattened detail. But I think the horizontal intent is fine. It's just a question of how that is carried out. And the final question is about the resiliency and raising the building. And you went to the trouble of drawing a section detail there, which and raised a lot of questions for me as to how this would actually happen. Since the foundation wall comes up to the other side of the floor joists and would allow access to that vault space. How you deal with plumbing, how you deal with adjustments to grade, since grade immediately in front of the building is on the sidewalk, and then that affects the street. How does all of that work? Or is this just
The grade is flush with the doors, so these are acceptable entrances.
but if you raise the door, of course, you have to raise the sidewalk, of course, and then you have to raise the street, of course.
Yeah, we don't, so we're keeping the detail, so that the top of the footing is actually below grade. And we're counting on waterproofing to keep water from getting, so you go back to that detail.
So is it, oh, okay. Yeah.
And so, so the floor, the exterior grade paving is flush with the floor, the interior floor. And so the sill plate, which goes 2 by 6 feet above the concrete. That looks, so the idea is that you can break the building from the footing. You can raise the building and have it put in the future if it's easy to go up. And that would assume that we have to raise the exterior grade and raise the floor.
I understand in concept, I just didn't kind of understand the reality of how it actually works. So I think there's a little bit more work to do there.
So it's very similar to the wood frame house that we looked at.
But the stone gets removed, the
Yeah.
waterproofing is broken.
That's right.
And the
Stone comes off.
plumbing somehow is disconnected
Exactly.
underneath. It requires access at some point, so I mean,
Sure. And, but we do intend to, maybe a knockout space in the concrete wall at either end of the city. Scissors in,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's some consideration to making that feasible, you know, hopefully it doesn't have to be looked at.
If I were showing that detail, you know, elevation that we developed this year, it would understand a little bit more how you would come. Thank you.
Next.
Stay on the architect side. Well, I've asked a couple questions I had, that question goes all outlined. The only one that I have, is how do we achieve that? I believe you can achieve this as well, so. But you achieve the corners, but you and more, and so. We're trying to achieve this new work.
You can have minor clatters on the corner, a little bit more craftsmanship involved. Bigger pop for it. And then same with shingles, either on the corners.
I guess I have questions about the screening that we had mentioned earlier. We decided that she agreed that the screening will be part of the special permit. So we got a site plan showing the location and dimensions of the screening as well as the elevation. There's a little bit of a or there are discrepancies because I would call them artistic discrepancies. The black and white plans show, 3 trees along the area between Central Walkway and the east side of the restaurant. And, the color sketches show 4 trees. The original, the planning plan that we have, or the plan we have in our August set, has the building on the other side of the project, right? And so it's a totally different, location. So, not this. Yeah, in the set we have, so building on the other side of the one.
Yeah, no, you're correct about the original, with the original submission. However, the updated plan set that was submitted with the site plan review is the same set that we uploaded here for the DOD special permit, the layout sheet. So this layout sheet here that you're seeing is in the record as, for at least for now, for the most recent plan set for the DOD special permit, showing the building in the right location. Yeah, so well, this is the same layout with the building in that location. That there might be, we might need to add a little bit more detail here, I guess, to clarify to your point earlier about the landscaping being done with the building. But I guess I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page that while the original filing did have the building footprint over here, right? I think that was where we started. It has been shifted and it is now the plan set on record for this permit is shown here, or am I missing something?
Yes.
I do see your point about the 3 trees in the or in the plan here, but the 4 trees in the rendering, but yeah. That's correct. And similar to the site plan discussion we had earlier tonight, all drawing sheets would have to be, rectified based on, where you go, the building design piece of it. We understand the landscaping is integral to this building project and you'd want them done simultaneously. But just to be clear, the plan set you're looking at here is the same plan under the DOD special permit right now as it was for the site plan, which does have the building in the right location and the landscaping areas in the right location. It might be just a question then of the details, if there's any.
We can look at that. I think the actual sheet 5 feet that are all planning in the August division. Or not, I may be wrong.
No, I think you're right about that. But we did submit plans just before this meeting, not today, but it was.
We didn't include the planning.
Correct, that's right. And similar to, right, and similar to the discussion earlier tonight, the landscaping plans would have to be adjusted to provide all that level of detail. Yes, yeah.
So this doesn't have these pieces in it. So the August plan is 3 1.
Yep.
And the difference because the color plans, so you look at the 4 trees.
Yes, and I see that discrepancy here. Yeah,
So
sure.
I guess when you look at the screen, I'm not sure that 3 or 4 trees is sufficient screening by itself from the path to the doors.
Gotcha.
And so what we might like to see as part of the final submission is showing the screening from
Central walkway, right here. Yep.
Whatever materials you're proposing.
Yep.
whatever vegetation you're proposing. So.
Yep, and I think it might make sense for us here, this is partly a direction of the society team, but I think it might make sense for us to hear, in addition to any of the plan sheets, adjustments to actually provide a blow up similar to what we done earlier tonight for the west parking lot, to do a little blow up of that. We can to help clarify, yeah.
I think we can understand how it all works.
Yep.
And I guess it's kind of repetitive, but since we're approving the special permit with the screening part of it, I think we should also have bring into this the planting materials. Yeah, so
Yes.
There's going to be a final planning plan as part of your final site plan submission, but I think we should also have that as part of the building submission even though it's not really part of the architecture, because it is part of the street.
Understood. Yep. Could you clarify, and probably for the team here, are you referring to, you know, the sort of prior to construction or as part of the plans that you're referencing in the DOD special permit? I just want to make sure
When we get a full set for the special permit.
for the special permit. Yep.
then I think we should see.
That level,
The heading is part of the street.
right. And you want to see the type, its caliper size, et cetera. Yep. Understood. Okay.
Well, we're on screen and moving, so different options. This planning board would weigh in on which of the, in front of the, in front of the, screening of the bathroom doors. And, I usually don't start, but while I've got my, I'm going to say I like the next, one, the trellis and the trees with the low thing. And if others have other ideas, you want to make arguments for that, I'll take them. I'm not trying to do this. Yeah, can you pull it back up again?
Sorry, did you, are you looking for the,
Three options for.
oh, the three options? Yeah.
Scene.
Sorry, so there are two that are shown here, and then there's the third one that was recommended. I agree with the chair. I think the multiple layers, if you will, in different heights or elevations of, this one here just has the trellis feature. This one has some trees, and the last one has all of them. So it's, yeah.
So, if you want to, anyone have any opinions on one of them? Grab a mic. There's one right here.
Sorry, John. I actually prefer the first one with the bench seating. I just think it's simpler and cleaner, and I think it makes sense to have bench seating outside of the restrooms. I couldn't tell on the proposed one where the bench seating was. Reference that there was some seating, but I couldn't tell where that would be. I also did wonder if I couldn't tell from the drawing whether it's lattice, like square lattice, and I wondered if you had given any thought to just using horizontal slabs.
It is horizontal. Horizontal.
And, sorry. Could I just-
Admittedly, they also have been spacing and slide. Rhythm of the neck. The intent is that it's semi-perforated and there's some planting at the low level.
So we'll get a little more detail for that. Eddie, could you clarify, if I'm not mistaken, I think we're still carrying in this scenario, the bench is on the restroom side, or am I mistaken there?
We're planning to do similar treatment on the other side, so it's
Sorry, just about the question. I think if I'm not mistaken, the question was whether or not in this third scenario with that additional landscaping, is the bench still this bench is still here, correct? Yeah, okay.
But there isn't one on the outside.
On the walkway side, there's not one, correct? Yeah. Just on the plaza side, yeah.
John, you want to do something on the screen?
Something else on that.
Oh, let's finish off on the screen first. I have a question on the screen. I agree that I like the layers of trees and the slats, but if you would do it layered, I'm wondering if you wouldn't be able to have signs, vegetation, with trees and straight shades, and just be trees and then we put in slats and some without vegetation on that.
Right. I think that's our assumption is that and that was actually discussion, sorry. If I could, sorry. Yeah, we had that discussion actually, and I think for the very point you raised, we don't expect to be able to grow things quite as easily in there. So we actually plan on it just being the trellis feature and not expecting vines to grow up on it behind the trees, so.
Did I understand that similar treatment as the walkway side? So we'll really focus on the procedure. You'll have
This rendering this shows, again, it's slightly narrower amount of space I think we were looking at a slow planting that's pretty, and so again, you can see the doors, they're not completely hidden, but that's probably a good thing. Wayfinding, get to this. Get the bathrooms. Visibility, but,
If I'm not mistaken, Rick, what you're getting at is you want to see the trellis feature, you want to confirm that the trellis feature is there with the trees, even if this bed is a little bit more narrow, is that?
I guess I was just thinking maybe the same people who work on this side, because the people are so close to the water on this side.
Yeah.
A different type of screen. I just suggest that. I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying about wanting to see through it, but at the same time, it might be nice not to walk in circles.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree, if I'm not mistaken, with the idea that the trellis feature with the trees, for instance, to provide that screening is best on this side as well as the plaza side. The pedestrians are just as close as they go down Central Wharf Way or New Central Wharf Way as they would be on the plaza side. So I think we'll have to look at the width there and what we have to work with, but I think I tend to agree with that.
All right, I think we're gonna need to see drawings, something much more specific before we're ready to approve it.
run through the screen.
Richard? Oh, Richard, so sorry, please, go ahead.
That's all right. I just was hoping to bring up the site plan for the option one, the one that's only the trellis. Just in terms of a blow up, you had it earlier,
All right, do you want? Yeah.
the looking straight down. This was option one. So I'm not gonna, drag out, since I know there's a lot of interest in option three, but I actually prefer this option because it's cleaner, it provides more hardscape. And if you look at the 3D image, the perspective of it, I thought it was just a cleaner solution. So if it were something to that effect, I would certainly be in favor of this option because I think having a little more hardscape is appropriate here. We certainly have a lot of softscape to offer in the park. That being said, if the consensus is for option three, then that's more than fine. And I also just want to I guess, put it out on record. I am in favor of this design. I appreciate its contemporary look and also the fact that it is looking at cues from the surrounding neighborhood, like the Harbor Master House, and the fact that it should be shingles, which I believe is what Glenn's observation was. But I think it's the right design and the right solution for where it is.
No, we're not making a decision on option three tonight. We're gonna leave that open, because we're, just to your point, and we will look at more detailed drawings of, the trellis by itself and the trellis with, trees, as the two possibilities, I think, for right now.
Sorry, I'm just wondering too with seasons, if the trees are deciduous and the plants, are in the state, what, it might look like. Yeah.
The intention was for that to be ever.
Okay.
Understandably, as you're looking at the
Yeah, the
rendering,
pictures
it
are-
looks as if it's deciduous. Yeah,
Right.
Understood. We'll confirm with the plan, a blow up as we discussed the updated plan with some detail showing the planting types and a little bit more detail on each side of the building and the restroom doors.
I was just gonna say, I think I'm really wanting to start with the trees, although I don't strongly with that by itself, with the greenery on it.
All right, let's move into the design.
Bonnie, I think there may be some more comments here.
This is just one additional question, comment, not related to the screen. Just wondering about, ventilation and air conditioning, and the equipment related to that. You've got parapets on the building that Yeah, I just have you looked at that in terms of heights, 3 inches, and then it's green.
There, the parapet height is 3 feet from a roof. And it's screening, a heat pump. No, it's a condenser for the heat pump. Is building. There's moderate air conditioning, moderate heating place for all spaces in the building. And ventilation. But the equipment will be one.
All of it is on the roof.
There's one piece of equipment on the roof that, and the rest of the equipment is in that mechanical room space. The unit that's on the roof.
You just say that the use of the but that's a big change. I'd say. So. I don't think we're gonna have to.
Yeah, just as discussed, we'll be coming back with some updated plans and details in there to show you all that detail that we've discussed this evening. Oh, yeah, no, very much understood that the site plans will have to match on that as well. Yeah, understood.
All right, I'd like to speak to the design of the structure. You showed us, buildings that you looked at in Newburyport and talked briefly about the federal style being simple and unadorned, which is reflected in a contemporary way, but not at all in any reference to that type of architecture. And the hip roof is very minimal, and from certain angles from the street, you can't see it. Here, there's no pitch at all, you see. And I am wondering, I'm not an architect, but I am wondering if you could simulate that look somewhat to make this roof look less flat, at least from some angles, from the street. You can still get all of the solar panels here, you can get the equipment there. Maybe there's some creative way to do that, and this being reference to a previous application we had, I would say something aesthetic that would make it more in keeping with the idea that the roof is other than flat. And I was also wondering if, if the entire building can be clad in shingles without any flat surface, or whether it's covered or what you call paneling. I'm not an architect yet, but I'm thinking about keeping it simple and fewer changes in the how to use the language, but the fewer changes in the exterior features, the more, I think, contemporary it's going to look, using materials that are maybe not as contemporary, i.e., single. Like our architects, that for anybody else on the board, can see where I'm going with this.
And I apologize, I just wanted to note for the chair and the other members, I have run into a little bit of technical issue. My battery, which suggested 5 hours at the beginning of the meeting, is now giving me 9 minutes. I'm not sure how much we can rely upon the numbers, so I normally bring my charger, but I did not unfortunately bring it today. So I just wanted to note that time frame wise, I don't know what will happen with our connection. We might lose Richard in our audience. I don't know how many minutes at this point, so it's hard to say. I had 5 hours at the beginning of the meeting. I don't know. It's all gone. So
back to my question. I really appreciate the board members. You two ideas that may not have expressed very well about the design and the material.
I think you get back here in time. We'll go down.
I'll start with respect to the materials. A comment was made earlier that the harbor master was used as perhaps one example with respect to